A Course in Miracles meets Science of Mind. And I am, did I make you a co-host? No, I did not. Oh, no, I did. Yep. All right. So, Zulma Gonzalez, this mic is all yours, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Lynn.
Uh,
And a
Science of Mind.
majestic
And
and magnificent Monday
did I?
to each and every only one of us. I'm going to say hello to Fish News in the room with me this morning. Good to see you. Hello. And I don't have the Pal Talk chat open, so I don't know who's there, but I will in a moment. In a moment, I can do that. In the ACIM gather room this morning at this time are Dove, Lynn, and Idelos. Glad you're here. Welcome, 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 and good morning to you.
And Zulma, Delia, Delos is Delia. Her name
Delia.
is Delia. Yeah. And it doesn't, it's, that's a screen name, obviously, but Delia Golden. And she's been with us for as forever, for
I've
years and
seen
years.
her name.
So,
Yeah, I've seen her name before. Yeah,
anyway,
Delia. I'll try to remember
back
that.
to
But
you.
thank you.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
hi, Delia. And glad you're here. So, we are, as we have been, looking at A Course in Miracles meets Science of Mind. And today, as always, we will start with the reminder. Starting screen share will stop other participants' computer sound share. Do you want to continue? Lynn?
Yeah, I fixed it. I forgot I was sharing sound. There, you can do it.
Okay. All right. There we go. All right. Um, there. And good morning, Michaela. Michaela has joined us this morning. Glad you're here. All right. So, as always, we are reminded by Dr. Ernest Holmes that to learn how to think is to learn how to live. And this comes from the Science of Mind textbook. That's on page 123. From the Course in Miracles, this is a course in mind training. All learning involves attention and study at some level. And an untrained mind can accomplish nothing. And Dr. Holmes says that thoughts and things are but two ends of the same proposition. Since it is impossible to stop thinking, we cannot stop creating. Our choice is whether we shall create constructively or destructively. We are reminded to mind our mind. Well, all right. Today, I want to kind of run around a little bit with different metaphysicians who are all saying the same thing, of course, because the teachings from one filtered down and trickled down to others. And I'm going to start with the first one known among all these is Mrs. Mary Baker Eddy. Mary Baker Eddy was the founder of Christian Science. And under Mary Baker Eddy, Emma Curtis Hopkins, Joel Goldsmith, Ernest Holmes, Emmett Fox, all these studied under her, as did Helen Schuckman's mother. Uh, and I thought that was important to mention because a lot of the works that I find in the course, um, as Helen was, well aware, and as she was channeling, what came through her is whatever was in her, and that being part of the teaching. So I had to mention Miss Mary Baker Eddy first. And the information here comes from the Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures and other works of hers. From Genesis to Revelation, the scriptures teach an infinite God and none beside him. And on this basis, Messiah and prophets saved the sinner and raised the dead, uplifting the human understanding buried in a false sense of being. Jesus rendered null and void whatever is unlike God, for he could not have done this if error and sin existed in the mind of God. And I'm focusing today on the mind of God, the laws of God and mind in general. Mary Baker Eddy continues, there is no involuntary action. And, because the Course, it says that we think that we are not responsible for what we think, but we are, but for what we do. No, there is no involuntary action. And you hear people say, oh, I didn't know what I was doing. That kind of thing. The divine mind includes all action and volition, that is our will. And man in science is governed by this mind. And this is mind with a capital M. The divine mind. We're talking about mind with a capital M. We're talking about that which we call God. It's the same mind that in the Course tells us that there are no laws but God's. We're talking about that law of mind, that law of God. And then she writes that the law of mind ultimately asserts its absolute supremacy. Absolute. Dr. Holmes, in his Declaration of Beliefs, said that he said, I believe in God, the living spirit almighty, one indestructible, absolute, and self-existent cause. All right. I'm going to go with the youngins. So Michael Bernard Beckwith, who heads Agape. Everybody has heard of Agape at some point or another, who has studied the mental sciences. Agape is out in California, and he too started out as under religious science, and then branched off into, he's not under Centers for Spiritual Living. He branched off into his own, has Agape. It is a magnificent, magnificent fellowship and teaching. Michael Beckwith, like Joel Goldsmith, had a revelation, and you can find this information on the internet, where he tells the story of what happened. Just something, 1 minute it was one thing, and the next one was another. He had a change of mind instantly. That moment when he knew that he was one with God. And Michael Beckwith says, we live in an ever-evolving universe governed by cosmic law. Although universal law is impersonal, in that it is not a respecter of persons and works for all alike, it becomes personalized through our individual application. And that basically speaks to the fact that I've been called Zulma, and you all have been called something else, and we all express God in our own unique and individualized way. There's no right or wrong. There's just a uniqueness that God has allowed, that life permits, to be able to appreciate each and every one, each and everything that God has created, because it all comes through us, as us. Michael Beckwith continues, universal law handles things when we are out of alignment with its principles. In just the same way, there are laws that govern the inner world of every individual. That which we call the external world and our individual inner world are not separate. Universal law operates in both the visible and invisible realms. And that's what, and the Course tells us, that there's no point in us focusing on the world, because that is incapable of change. But there is a point in looking at the cause, changing our mind about the world. That's where the change actually comes. The world itself can't change, but when we see it differently, it becomes different. Nothing changes if nothing changes, and when we change our mind, everything around us changes as well. Universal law operates in both the visible and invisible realm. And this is what we talk about. We talk about the mental equivalent that Emmett Fox talks about in the mental equivalent. The course, Michael Beckwith also teaches that you can consciously co-create with universal law a life lived in harmony, peace, joy, and creativity. And the course reminds us that we are co-creators with God, and we have to be. If God is part of what we are, part of what God is, we are what God is. The sonship is a whole. It is the entirety, the allness of God. It is the allness of God. And we are individualized expressions, individualized manifestations of that. I think I'll go with the course next. A Course in Miracles first teaches that God's mind cannot be lessened. It can only be increased. And Fishner, just so you know, you're welcome to participate, raise hand, comment. It would be great. Michaela already knows that, so I don't have to tell her that. Lynn already knows that. I don't have to tell her either. You are welcome to participate. So just raise your hand and let me know if there's anything that grabs you that you'd like to contribute. This is not necessarily an hour for me to just talk for the whole hour. Although if no one else chooses to participate, then I have to. But this is not what this is about. I prefer the interchange, the exchange of minds here. From the course, fundamental law of the mind is one that always operates. It is the law by which you create and were created. It is the law that unifies the kingdom and keeps it in the mind of God. And the course continues, if you were not part of God, his will would not be unified. Is this conceivable? Can part of his mind contain nothing? If your place in his mind cannot be filled by anyone except you, and your filling it was your creation, without you, there would be an empty place in God's mind. And of course, as it just said, that's absolutely impossible. There is no spot where God is not. There is no spot where God is not. The omnipresence of God means everywhere present, always, omnipresent. And the last quote from the course, thoughts are not born and cannot die. They share the attribute of their creator, nor have they a separate life apart from his. So although we are unique and individualized and all that, we're still not separate from God. God breathes me. We're taught that we live, move, and have our being in God. We live in God. We move in God. We have our being in God. I substitute the word God for the word life sometimes. We live in life. We move in life. We have our being in life. Life breathes me. Life breathes us. Just as we breathe it in, it breathes us. That's what we're from where we're living. The course continues. The thoughts you think are in your mind, as you are in the capital M mind, which thought of you. And so there are no separate parts in what exists within God's mind. Oh my God, Dove, I was just thinking about you. Just this second, I thought of you. Just this second, I thought of you. And you appeared. Oh, I've manifested my love, Dove. Great to see you. I mean, just that second. As I was reading, I'm thinking, oh God, I wish Dove was here. And there you are. See? That's what one mind is. Oh my God. That really got me. I have to admit. Oh, I wasn't ready for that. Well, thank you. And I was ready and I wasn't ready. Thank you. And so there are no separate minds in what exists within God's mind. It is forever one, eternally united, and at peace. I'm still taking that one in, Dove. Wait a minute. I'm still taking that in. Ooh, I mean, like that. Wow. Ah, and feel free to share if you want to. All right.
Actually, hey, Zulma, it's Vishnu. I'm really enjoying this, and I wanted to ask. There's that section in the course where it says the mind is the activating agent of the spirit, or something to that effect. And I wanted to get some. Wanted to, I guess, expand on that more, and
Let me,
because I find this whole discussion uh, not every, but I find that there are different ways of viewing the mind, right? And so I just wanted to get some clarification or expand on the mind component of it, based on this, because I really like the presentation that you're
thank you.
providing.
So the passage that you're speaking of is in the clarification of terms, and it reads, the term mind with a small m is used to represent the activating agent of spirit. And that is, as I see it, as I understand it, the only way that I can communicate with you on this plane is through my thoughts. And my thoughts are coming through my mind. Spirit is the eternality of what I am. Eternality. So everything starts with spirit. Everything begins with spirit. God, life, truth, the beginning, the beginning which had no beginning, the all of it. So the only way that I can express is through my words. My words come from my thoughts. My thoughts come from my mind. And spirit is over all that. The activating agent. It is for me to even be able to say, that it's all just one spirit, that it's all just one spirit, even though the word spirit here is not capitalized. But the course tells us early on that we are in a state, that spirit is in a state of grace forever, that our reality is only spirit. And that's very early, the top of page 8 or page 10 of the course. And that is our reality, our eternal reality. So everything begins there. The activating agent, it is the beginning. It is actually the absolute beginning. And the only way for us to express it is through the term mind, and through the mind. That's what I have. Um, Anybody else? Michaela, Dove, either of you have any comment on that? No. All right. Um, Vishnu, anything else you'd like to share?
No, let's keep on going.
Okay.
Thanks. Thank
All
you.
right. And that's how I understand it. Now, someone else may have a different understanding. Okay, so somebody's typing in the chat. I need to see what's in the chat. Yes, Dove, we are all connected in truth. Oh, in truth. Yes. Oh, Lynn, sound is low in Pal Talk, Dove says, just so you know. And if it's good here, then I'm gonna trust that it's a Pal Talk issue, not mine. All right. So we have looked at Mary Baker Eddy. We have looked at Michael Bernard Beckwith. We have looked at the course. Now, I don't know, based on their ages, who came first, the chicken or the egg, that sort of thing. But I am going to look at Miss Emma Curtis Hopkins. Emma Curtis Hopkins was one of the students also under Mary Baker Eddy, and ultimately broke off and began teaching on her own, and teaching, studying other metaphysicians. Yes, she studied other metaphysicians, and developed work of her own. She too was one of the healers. Actually, was able to, through her word, uh, through her word and the power of belief of the individual, was able to heal, not only, well, first mentally, of course, because all healing, real healing, is of the mind. The only real healing is of the mind, and the body just followed through. It just followed through. So she is known for that. So Emma Curtis Hopkins, and I was going to add some more, but it was time to come on. So the only thing I have from her right here is that she says in her book, Scientific Christian Mental Practice, I am governed by the law of God and cannot sin or fear sin, sickness, or death. And we're reminded over and over in the course that there is no sin. And this is the reason why she can't fear it, because she understood that it was not real. She understood that sickness was not a physical thing, that it was of the mind. The body may demonstrate that way, but that's everything. Sickness is of the mind, and death is there is no death at all. Everything changes, everything transforms, but there is no death. Even the body after it ceases to do what it does. And the course teaches us that nothing survives its purpose. The molecules that were our body, that were the body, they're still here. They're still here. I don't know if they evaporate or what have you, but somewhere along the way, we have to be inhaling that. We have to be. It's still all here. There's no place for it to go, because there is no such thing as God and, as I learned that Joel Goldsmith said, there's no such thing as God and. So everything is always here. Everything is always God. It just doesn't change. It just changes form. Like water, ice, and vapor. They change form. And vapor, once it seems to disappear into the air, we don't see it. And later on, we get rain clouds. I don't know if that's part of that, but it's nothing goes anywhere. It's always all here. Even that which we see and then can't see is still here. And Emma Curtis Hopkins says that we are reasoning out the laws of the action of capital M mind as it conquers the universe with righteousness when we step along in ideas with Moses and Jesus. I'd like to welcome my sister friend Cynthia, who's just joined the room. Cynthia is a licensed licensed religious science practitioner at the Center of Peace, where we attend here in Philadelphia. Hi, Cynthia. Feel free at any time. Cynthia, we've read some passages from Emma Curtis Hopkins. We have read some passages from Mary Baker Eddy. Today, we're just talking about the law of mind. We were looking at Mary Baker Eddy. We've looked at Michael Bernard Beckwith. We just finished looking at Emma Curtis Hopkins. And now we're going to move on to Emmett Fox. Emmett Fox, who was also a student of Mary Baker. Michaela, your hand, go ahead.
Oh, I love what you're discussing and how you're bringing in all these different great thought thinkers or authors. So it's really beautiful, and it's really true. I have a little bit of the body has a little bit of a cold today, and other members of my family do too. And we were all kind of under some stress from my youngest son. And some difficulties he's going through. And it's interesting how we're in different states, but yet the body takes on the symptoms of the thought system. And so now we all have colds. And so it's so true. It's so true. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Perfect example. Perfect example that it manifests. We actually get to see it. What goes on inside. The course teaches that it's an outward expression of an inward condition. And what we see on the outside is what's coming from the inside. It always comes from the inside out, and it always begins with that activating agent, spirit coming from mind. Absolutely. Emmett Fox, in his book, The Mental Equivalent, he says, always the prison is in our thought and not in the nature of things, which is what I said earlier from workbook lesson 23, that there is no point in lamenting the world So they're talking about all the stuff that's going on out there. There's no point in it. And we do it. Oh my God, all this stuff. Oh, look at what's happening oh my God, look at all that stuff. There's no point in lamenting the world. It is incapable of change. There is a point in looking at the cause, our thoughts, our mind, and there we can change the cause. And once we change there we're looking at the cause. And once the cause is changed, then everything else was going to change. It's as simple as that. I am willing to see it differently because I am not the victim of the world I see. Emmett Fox writes that the law of mind is that you can only get rid of one thought by substituting another. That's interesting. The law of mind is that you can only get rid of one thought by substituting by substituting another. And that is what the Course teaches us, that I can see peace instead of this. It teaches us that I am, that I want to see things differently, that above all else, I want to see things differently. And in order to see things differently, we have to be willing to let go of what the old thought was in order to replace it with a new thought. We're talking about removing the blocks, the obstacles to love. There's nothing we can do about it. Love is there. Love is what we are. But we have all this misinformation that we've been given early on. And the Course reminds us to resign as your own teacher, for you have been taught wrongly. Let it go, let it go, let it go. So the law of mind is that you can only get rid of one thought by substituting another. And Emmett Fox also teaches a different idea. That is the key to the management of your mind, the management of your thinking, and therefore the key to the management of your destiny. Change your thinking, change your life. Change your thought processes, change your world. Cause, not the effect. Cause a different idea. Above all else, I want to see things differently. And he writes, actually, I love this quote. I really would like to save it for last. So I'm going to go past this for a moment and go to Joel Goldsmith from Living the Infinite Way. Joel S. Goldsmith, Living the Infinite Way. And he too was a student of Mary Baker. These people were all teaching around the same time. Their teachings all began around the same time, branching this way and that, but they all had the need to express the God that they are and to share that, the God that they are, because we can't keep it to ourselves, because we are not of ourselves. We have to share it. We have to share it. At least I feel I do. I have a friend says to me, do you always have to talk about? Yes, I do. Can't help it. And it doesn't matter if you talk about, you lost a shoe or you found a wallet. Yes, I do. I can't help it. It's a part of me. It is a part of me. And I realize it's a part of me. And to the extent that we're taught in the Course to guard our thoughts. We are taught to engage with God. To the extent that we engage with God, we have to see things differently because we're putting God first. We're putting the truth first and not judging what's out there, not attempting to interpret what we see out there. So Joel S. Goldsmith says, it becomes necessary to ponder the idea of God as law. And in so doing, we discover that we must give great attention to that idea if we are to bring our lives into harmony, wholeness, and completeness, into oneness or at one-ment. Now, interestingly enough, the word at one-ment, and because he has the dashes in between at dash one dash ment, If we took the dashes out, it would be the word atonement, into oneness or at one-ment with truth and with love. I like that word at one-ment. I like that word at one-ment because, again, without the dashes, it would be atonement, which is still the oneness. We're talking about the oneness because in order to atone, we have to be willing to undo the thought that we are separate. We have to undo the belief that we can be separate from our Creator. Ideas don't leave their source. So there's no possible way. And because our source is eternal, we too are eternal. And in recognizing that about myself, then it lets me recognize that about you. But I have to be willing to recognize that again, engaging with God, engaging with God, engaging with God, meeting one right where they are, not judging them, because then I don't see who they really are. I see who I think they are, but not judging them, but just recognizing that it's all spirit. And the Course reminds us that every response we make is determined by what we think we are. So if I think I'm a body, then yes, I'm going to treat you like a body. But if I'm remembering that I am spirit, if I am engaging with God, then I have no choice but to remember that you are too. And Joel continues, God is law. God is law, and there are no exceptions to God's law. You need not protect anyone or anything, because the law of God is the protection unto its own creation. That is a comfort for me. That's a comfort, because when walk out the door and things are happening out there, it's every now and then you hear a noise, a rustling noise. My doggie who found me on the streets in June of last year. He was out there obviously for a time because of, you could see the lack of care he'd had over when I found him. And even now, if he hears a rustling, he automatically jumps, he turns, he sees somebody coming down the street, he stops, he jumps, particularly certain types of people, he stops and he'll he either won't move or he'll run. He goes into flight or freeze mode. He doesn't attack. He doesn't attack. From a distance, if somebody tries to come near me, then he might, attempt to bark. He'll bark at but other than that, but it's evident that he has not yet come to the place where he's comfortable. Now, there are times when I'll say to him, it's okay. And you can see him calm down. He go around certain people, but he has, again, that the misinformation that he was given, that everything out there was dangerous. And now he's safe, but in the Course it says that prisoners who had long been chained and bound, and they don't automatically just go into an instant metamorphosis. They go an instant change when they are freed. It takes time for them to open their eyes to become accustomed to the light, and that's what's going on with him. At least now, when I say it's okay, he calms down. At one minute. God is law, and there is no exception to God's law. You need not protect anyone or anything, because the law of God is the protection unto its own creation. God is first the creator of all, and that makes all that is the very image and likeness of God. God is the first creator of all, what we call first cause. First cause, capital F, capital C. God is first the creator of all, and that makes all that is the very image and likeness of God. God is the maintainer, and God is the law unto its own creation. And the Course continues to remind us of that very thing. We cannot separate ourselves from God. We cannot. I and the Father are one. I and my Creator are one. I am one self with my Creator. God is the maintainer, and God is the law unto its own creation. This realization is a high and effective form of prayer. Since God is the life of all, and God life being eternal and immortal, all that is eternal and immortal. Now, hear this. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Anything that's not real is not permanent. Nothing that is what we can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch is all temporary. It's all temporary. And aren't we surprised when we hear that, oh, so and so passed? And we're surprised as if they weren't supposed to, or they were never going to. I guess, it's the fact that it happened and we weren't expecting it, or even if we were expecting it, it's just something that we do. But we're eternal. It doesn't matter that we drop the body again. Nothing survives its purpose. We are eternal. We are always one in God. And that can be no other way. God is love, maintaining and sustaining its own creation, which is why we're always safe. There's nothing to be saved from. There's nothing to be forgiven of. There's none of that. None of that. That's the stories that we have made up when we came with this earth plane. We chose to think that there was something wrong with us, that there was something wrong with the people outside of us, that there was something wrong with the way the world is going, and to the point that we think that something must be wrong with God, because why would God, the God that we were taught, the God that used to be the God of my understanding, why would God let that happen? And as we discussed on Thursday, the great discovery is that we have been left to discover ourselves. Free will means being allowed to make our own choices. The fact that we are able to, that we have choice, that's the eternal gift of God, that we have choice and we can do for ourselves however we choose, however we please. We call it extension of love or a call for love. What we call fear is a call for love, because if God is all there is, then even that which is coming from our thoughts is still love. I just had a thought and I lost it right there. Oh, faith. I was having a conversation with someone last evening about faith, talking about that faith and fear, they actually come from the same place. Because faith is believing in something that we don't see that we want. Fear is believing in something that we don't see that we don't want. It's coming from the same place. Coming from the same place. The faith and the fear are all coming from our mind. Again, that activating agent. That activating agent. I love that. Thank you for that, Vishnu. Thank you so much for that. So I'm going to move on to Dr. Ernest Holmes. But before I go to the quotes, I think I'll go into one of the readings from Dr. Ernest Holmes. I need to drop this. Oh no, you know what? I'll read that afterwards. Quotes by Ernest Holmes from his 365 Science of Mind, a year of daily wisdom from Ernest Holmes. Dr. Holmes writes, "We believe that the mind of God governs all things." And I'm just, basically, everything I'm saying is repetitious, and it has to be. It has to be. The truth is true across the board. The truth is true across the board. God is. And there we cease to speak. There's what else? There is nothing but God. There is nothing but God. God is the isness of it all. Joel Goldsmith says exactly that, over and over in one of the chapters in Living the Infinite Way. God is. We can say God is love, and we can say God is peace, and we can say God is, who do you hear say God is cancer, God is the bullet, God is the God is the system, the government system. Who do we hear say that? We don't. But if we don't, then we're saying that those things are separate. That too is not part. That too is not one with God. There is no spot where God is not. Always, everywhere, eternal, unchanging. And the only thing in form that we do know is that change is inevitable. That has to change. Decisions are continuous, the course teaches. So we're always, something is always happening, always happening, always changing, ever evolving. Life continues. Life doesn't stop. I couldn't buy the 7-day story, that God, created the world in created everything in 7 days, because if that had been the case, then everything would have just been 7 days old. Everything that's here today is a continuation. There is no time, in truth. There is no time. The basics may have been formed that way. It's like creating a sculpture. You have this mold of just clay, and you start chipping away at it and chipping away at it and chipping away at it till you get the form that you're looking for. But all things continually evolving. Once upon a time, we didn't know of an internet. Once upon a time, Moses didn't know about electricity. Electricity existed, but Moses didn't know it. All things have always been here. That's why the course teaches that being and having are the same. Being and having are the same. Everything has always been here, always. And we're reminded in the workbook lesson 80 that to look at a problem to see that it's already been solved. The fact is that there are no problems. There are no problems. It's just our belief as I'm right now. Okay, so my problem right now is that I can't see the computer screen. That's a problem. I have to solve the problem, but I can't quote solve the problem if I continue to think with the mind that made the problem. I have to think in a different way. I have to be willing to see this differently and realize that all I have to do is remove the block. The mind of God governs all things. And in holding to that thought alone, life becomes smoother. It becomes easier. It becomes our function. Happiness is our function. God's will for us is perfect happiness. Workbook lesson 101, perfect happiness. And Ernest Holmes continues, proclaim the omnipotence of God. Proclaim the omnipotence of God. The guidance of the capital M mind that knows all things, and the peace that is beyond every confusion. The omnipotence of God. All power. All power. All power. Not some over here and some over there. All power is from the same source. And Dr. Holmes continues, every person is already established in the universal mind, whose creative law must manifest the ideas presented to it. Has to. We're back to the mental equivalent again. So the whole action takes place in your own consciousness. And that goes back to that activating agent that you spoke of, that you brought up, Vishnu. All of it takes place in your own mind, in your own consciousness. Your treatment, that is your prayer, your affirmative prayer, your spiritual mind treatment, working through the law of mind, capital L, capital M, produces results according to your faith and conviction. Emmett Fox says it's the mental equivalent. It's the mental equivalent. And Dr. Holmes continues, spirit creates through law. The law is always mind in action. Mind cannot act unless intelligence sets it in motion. In other words, we have to, this ability for us to think, this ability for us to create, the ability that we have had to come from somewhere. Of course, it came from the source. We didn't just, on our own and of myself. The Course says, of myself, I am nothing. I speck of dust. Not even. Ideas don't leave their source. The source is what makes it possible. This intelligence that he speaks of. And this is one of the earlier, this comes from one of the earlier works of his. So occasionally the word in this instant, the words intelligence and stuff like that are not capitalized yet. By the time he wrote his second edition of the Science of Mind text in 1938, then we get to see where he has the word mind is more often capitalized, and the word intelligence, divine intelligence, are capitalized, and it's clear. It's very clear. And it's, the same thing with this text. It's gone through a couple of editions, and things have been to make it clear, just to make it plainer. And Dr. Holmes continues, in the great universal mind, man is a center of intelligence. And every time he thinks, he sets mind into action. What is the activity of this mind in relation to man's thought? It has to be one of mental correspondence. Again, that mental equivalent. What we all thought, the Course teaches that all thought produces form at some level. All thought produces form at some level. Not some thought, but all thought produces form at some level. So what is the activity of this mind in relation to man's thought? It has to be one of mental correspondence. That is, mind has to reflect whatever thought it casts into it. So if I am in the ego thought system thinking that everything is wrong and everything is bad, and I'm no good and everything is terrible and you're just awful, and if that's the thought system that I'm in, if I'm in the belief that I'm right and you're wrong and you don't know what you're doing because I whatever, or if I'm comparing myself to someone else on the other end of the spectrum and thinking that they think that they're so this because they have something I don't, the mind is going to reflect exactly that. I'm going to become, it could be physical illness. It could become quote mental illness. Any of those possibilities. The mind has to reflect whatever thought it casts into it, because all thought produces form at some level. All thought. If I am, on the other hand, thinking from the Holy Spirit thought system and recognizing that you and I are one, that in truth there is no and, that it's just one. When Bob Marley is a Rastafarian, the Rastafarians, they don't say unify, they say oneify. Oneify. It's not you and me. It's just one. It's just one. And I believe it was in the Practicing the Presence we were reading the other day, I think, where Joel Goldsmith tells a story. I think that's where it was. So many things, I pick up so many things, but they were telling the story about the man who went to heaven. It's a story. He went to heaven, and when he was asked, who is it? He said, it is I. And he was told, no, you can't come in. And he's like, what? I've lived a good life. I don't understand what's going on here. And then several years later, he, pondered that. And he comes back, and again, he says, and he's asked, who is it? And he says, it is I. And again, he's turned away. And he goes off and he ponders for some more years. And finally, he goes and he knocks on the heaven's gate, and God answers. He says, who is it? he says, thou art, it is thou that art. And at that point, he was able to come in to realize there was no separation. There was no him and God. There is no God and. It is all one. It is all one. So every thought that the mind has, the mental correspondence is that mind has to reflect whatever thought is cast into it. So if I'm in the, thinking from the Holy Spirit thought system and I'm recognizing our oneness, I'm recognizing that everything that I'm seeing is an effect. I am recognizing that everything that I am thinking is coming from me. Everything that I see is based on my thought. It's all based on my thought. And as I'm realizing this more and more and more, the mind has to reflect whatever thought it casts into it. So I attract beauty. I attract grace. I attract laughter. I attract friendship. I attract love, the extension of love. I attract it because that's what's coming from me when I'm focused, thinking, living from the Holy Spirit thought system, when I'm engaging with God, when I'm not letting myself forget, when I am guarding my thoughts. Mind has to reflect whatever thought it casts into it. So I am going to read, let me bring this down and share again from Ernest Holmes, from his 365 about subjectivity. And it reads thus: the mind of God is the only mind there is, and we all use this mind, capital M all the way through here. But in the use of it, we create a mental atmosphere that surrounds us, and that is often thought of as the unconscious or the subconscious. This is not a separate mind. It is merely a reaction of the one mind principle to the use we have made of it. And that it is capital I. You and I could no more have an individual mind than we could have an individual ownership of the principle of mathematics or of harmony or of beauty. Again, there is no spot where God is not. Each of us is creating in an individual way. We are individualizations in this one mind, capital O, capital M. We are individualizations in this one mind, and no two of us are exactly alike. And that is, of course, in form. But we all are immersed in the collective thought of the whole human race. Jung has called this the collective unconscious. Just as we have an individual subconscious reaction to life, we also have a collective subconscious reaction to life. And that collective, we call it race consciousness. Somebody says this and we go along with it, and then we tell somebody and they go along with it, and we're all now in that same belief system. And in the word belief, we know is the word LIE. Beliefs are not facts. Facts are it's not beliefs aren't the truth. Beliefs are not the facts. Belief is just something that comes and something that goes. And Dr. Holmes continues, and just as we are more or less automatically influenced and perhaps too much controlled by our individual subconscious reactions, we also are influenced by the subconscious reactions of the ages. Tradition too largely governs us. But we should never forget that back of all this is the divine mind or intelligence itself, all capitalized, divine mind, intelligence itself, in which there is no bondage, no fear, and no evil. It is toward this great center within us that we must travel if we wish to become emancipated from the unconscious reactions of our own being. That is, if we were to become emancipated from the belief that we are an ego. The Course teaches that the Holy Spirit asks us to act as though we are not an ego, because we're not. The ego is something made up. It's the boogeyman. It's a made up story. It's not real. Dr. Holmes continues, today, I affirm freedom from the limitation of my own thought. I am no longer hypnotized by the mind of history. The divine intelligence, capital D, capital I, the divine intelligence within me is transcendent of all previous experience. And that is, the Course says, resign as your own teacher. There is no past. The shadowy figures of the past are precisely what we must escape. That's what the Course teaches. The divine intelligence within me is transcendent of all previous experience, free in its own right, existing in its own being. And this "it's," by the way, is capitalized. Capital I. We're still talking about God. We can't escape it. We cannot escape the truth of what we are. We cannot escape L with a capital L, life with a capital L. We can't escape it. It is always the truth. So the divine intelligence within me is transcendent of all previous experience, free in its own right, existing in its own being, and creating and manifesting from the center of its own perfection. And that "it's" still talking about God. I can read it that way: existing in God's own being and creating and manifesting from the center of God's own perfection. It is free in God's own right. This radiant center in me is making everything new in my life and in the lives of those around me. The Course says, it talks about how the freedom that we get if we would meet ourselves and our brothers without judgment. Because in judging them, we're not seeing them for who they are, and we've attached ourselves. We've then attached ourselves to what we think they are, to the body that they are, thinking that we must be a body if they are. But the tremendous freedom, the Course says, the tremendous freedom that comes with meeting ourselves and our brothers without judgment. So this radiant center in me is making everything new in my life and in the lives of those around me. That is, I am thinking from the Holy Spirit thought system. I am letting the Holy Spirit run the show. The voice for God that's guiding me and directing me, that I'm willing to stop, to be still, to know. And the workbook lessons give us that opportunity to sit and be still so that we can know. And Cynthia types, as our elders would say, there is nothing new under the sun. Yes, that's true. Nothing new under the sun. It's always here. It's always all God. It's always all God. I'm going to stop sharing this screen now and go back to this screen so that I can read that final quote from Emmett Fox. So Emmett Fox asks that we build a mental equivalent of freedom, of vibrant physical health, of true prosperity, of increasing understanding and achievement for God. Build it by thinking of it, having faith in it, and acting the part. And the old limitation equivalent will gradually fade out, for the door is unlocked and the voice of God in your heart says, be free. The Course reminds us, I am not a body. I am free, for I am still as God created me. Thank you all. Thank you, every one of us, every only one of us, for being here with me. And Lynn, I turn the mic over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zulma. Wow, this has been really inspiring. You're doing a great job with that. All these beautiful, bringing it all together. And I'm just really, really grateful for you doing that, choosing that. So thank you, Zulma, and thank you everyone who came in. And we'll be back at what time is it? We'll be back at 2:00 p.m. Here in Zoom for the Justice of God with Dove, and usually it's Karen. I don't know who will be with them today, but we'll be going through that from chapter 25. So looking forward to that. And thank you so much, Zulma. Thank you so much, everyone.